quatrième top, il sera exactement 0 heure, 0 minute, 0 seconde.
J'ai deux motifs quand je travaille, deux poursuites. Je poursuis la liberté et je poursuis le plaisir. Parce que j'ai horreur de travailler. D'abord, faire un bon travail. Ce qui m'intéresse, c'est des idées. Ah, on me dit, vous avez abandonné la photographie maintenant. Vous ne faites plus la photographie, vous faites la peinture. Je dis, mais non, je n'ai pas abandonné la photographie. Je le fais depuis 35 ans et j'ai fait la peinture depuis 35 ans. Moi, je suis un homme qui mène une vie double. Et je peux faire les mêmes choses en photographie que je peux faire en peinture. Il n'y a pas de limite. On appelle ça quelquefois une tricherie. Mais moi, je dis, la tricherie d'aujourd'hui sont les vérités de demain.
In this 1932 self-portrait, the wristwatch is not a gratuitous detail. It echoes the artist's concentrated, absorbed gaze, marking the passage of time. Photography is all about time. For the photographer, time is a matter of life and death. Life and death can be a joke, especially when, like Man Ray, you possess such an acute sense of time and timing. But they are truths nonetheless. The poet Tristan Tzara wouldn't deny it, nor would this goddess of love for hire, a herald of death. The same notion that time is the master of photographic art underlies this curious self-portrait published in February 1923 in André Breton's magazine Littérature. The self-portrait is called Monsieur Inventeur, Constructeur, 6 secondes. The photographer is a man whose fingerprints are expressed in fractions of a minute. His eyes are cogs, precision mechanisms. His nose is a metronome, beating time. My mother told me I made my first man on paper when I was 3. So begins Man Ray's memoir, published as self-portrait.
Allow me to introduce myself. This is Man Ray, American-born, who chose France as his most permanent home.
Man Ray's life was simple, a 4-beat waltz. The first beat was America, the second France, the third America, and the fourth France again. He was born in Philadelphia on August the 27th, 1890. At 31 he left New York for Paris. He was 50 when he fled the war in 1940 to seek refuge in Hollywood. At 61 in 1951, he returned to live in Paris, where he died in 1976 at the age of 86. In all, he lived 42 years in America and 44 in France. His first major work was this patchwork, made in 1911 from 110 fabric samples he'd found in his parents' garment factory. Somewhere between cubism and abstraction, it's a resolutely modern object. He signed it Man Ray, an alias drawn from his own name. This work is an original departure from his early paintings. They had mirrored his successive discoveries of Cézanne, Matisse, Picasso and Cubism. In 1913, he moved to Ridgefield, a small town in New Jersey with an artists' colony. There he rented a timber house and lived with Adon Lacroix, a Belgian poet with whom he was in love. They married in May 1914. She taught him French and introduced him to Baudelaire, Lautréamont, Rimbaud, Mallarmé, Apollinaire. She wrote poetry, which he made into calligrams. In Ridgefield in 1915, Man Ray first met French artist Marcel Duchamp, who had just come to New York to visit his American admirers. His nude descending a staircase had created a sensation at the first International Modern Art Show in New York 2 years earlier. Man and Marcel immediately became friends and left the party to play chess. It was the start of a great friendship and a chess rivalry that would last all their lives. Without making chess the key to his art as Duchamp did, Man Ray was a keen player. He always kept a chess set in his studio, usually of his own creation. He made many chess sets throughout his life. He liked using them in his self-portraits and as props in his photos. He reproduced them in his paintings. He enlarged and transformed them into objets d'art. But let's return to 1916. Adon Lacroix and Man Ray split up. Man Ray moves to New York. There he meets Marcel Duchamp again. Duchamp is experimenting with roto-relief, machines that create pictures in space as they revolve. Duchamp no longer believed in painting. He now exhibited ready-made objects like this bicycle wheel, this bottle rack, a snow shovel and a urinal which scandalized the public. But Man Ray continued to paint. This is his famous rope dancer accompanies herself with her shadow. But he also kept tinkering with metaphorical objects, which aimed higher than simple ready-mades. Like this tube filled with marbles that he called New York. Or this tightly wrapped parcel containing a sewing machine, which he called the Enigma of Isidore Ducasse, after a line from Lautréamont's Les Chants de Maldoror, as beautiful as the chance meeting on a dissecting table of a sewing machine and an umbrella, a notion that the surrealists would later turn into a rallying cry. Man Ray was ahead of the pack. Breton hailed him as a pre-surrealist. Symbolic objects versus ready-mades. Man Ray and Marcel Duchamp's inventions followed and challenged each other like moves in an endless chess game. Duchamp's ideas were brilliant but rare. Man Ray responded with astonishing abundance, as if trying to drown his opponent with playfulness. Disappointed with photographs taken by others of his own work, Man Ray bought a camera and started doing it himself. He asked Duchamp if he could photograph his work. Duchamp agreed. One day, Man Ray came to photograph the large glass, a work that Duchamp hadn't touched for 6 months. The glass was lying in dust, which interested Man Ray. A single bulb was hanging from the ceiling. Man Ray switched it on, focused his camera, and opened the shutter. The light was so feeble, the exposure had to be about 30 minutes. Man Ray and Duchamp went out for lunch. Later they both signed the photo. Duchamp called it élevage de poussière, dust breeding, a title that Man Ray also used. But it's also known as the domain of Rose c'est la vie. Rose c'est la vie was Duchamp dressed as a woman, role-playing designed to deride and subvert not only society, but art too. The artist is his own work of art. No point trying to paint or sculpt other bodies. Only his own is allowed, and only when reproduced by mechanical means. Duchamp's proclamation effectively prohibited any representation of the human form. Man Ray echoed Duchamp's statement by calling a photo of an egg beater la femme, woman, and this one of photographic reflectors and their shadows, l'homme, man. But he was also contradicting Duchamp. With their anthropomorphic titles, these photos announced, ironically of course, that all was not lost, and that photography would take up the banner for the human figure. This work has a similar aim. A coat hanger paired with a real naked woman. He made it for the magazine New York Dada, published by the New York Dada group, which was trying to repeat in America the revolt that Sarah and his friends had pulled off in Zurich and Paris. Early in 1921, Man Ray wrote to Sarah, "Dada cannot exist in New York, because New York is Dada." Man Ray decided to leave America for Europe, encouraged by Duchamp, who had already returned to Paris. Man Ray landed in Le Havre on July the 22nd, 1921. Marcel Duchamp met him at the Gare Saint-Lazare in Paris. After showing him to his hotel, he took him straight to a Dada meeting at the Café Certa, in an alley near the Opera. The café served only port. Man Ray was eagerly awaited, above all because he came from New York. Sarah, Breton, Aragon, Soupeau, Ribon, Rigaud, Éluard all dreamed of America, Man Ray noted, while he was hungry for Europe. He showed them photos of the paintings he'd left in New York, using only a spray gun in place of brushes. He had also brought along a few objects. Soupeau immediately offered to organize an exhibition in his wife's bookshop. It opened a few months later. Man Ray was hailed as a great American artist, but didn't sell a single painting. Irritated by this flop, which he moaned about to his friends, Man Ray aggressively slipped in at the end of the opening a new object called cadeau, gift. He improvised it on the spot with an iron and a few nails from a nearby store, as if to say, "Take that." Despite the exhibition's failure, Man Ray did become successful in Paris, but as a photographer. He soon astonished his friends with photos taken without a camera. In a dark room, Man Ray laid a few ordinary objects, a candlestick, an egg whisk, a light bulb, and so on a sheet of photographic paper. After a short exposure, the print was developed. Where the objects or their shadows had blocked the light, the print was shades of white and grey. The rest, fully exposed to the light, turned black. Man Ray soon became a master of this technique. The combinations of hard and soft shapes, the overlay of shadows falling from above or from the side, the contrasts obtained with different exposures, the transparency and opacity of different kinds of materials, gauze, tube, perspex, and blown glass. These photos were so successful that they were soon known as rayographs after the artist. Fashion designer Paul Poiret bought some, just as if he were buying paintings. A set of 12 was published as a limited edition book with the title Champs Délicieux, Delicious Fields. Sarah wrote the preface, entitled Photography Upside Down. Rayographs were also published in Vogue, Vanity Fair, Les Feuilles Libres, La Révolution surréaliste. Man Ray was an instant success. His friends lavished him with praise. "You've come to liberate painting," wrote Cocteau. Man Ray, added Desnos, reveals a land as tangible and physical as light, heat, and electricity. Its mysterious form hardly distinguishes between the fragility of paper and the solidity of porphyry. In other words, Man Ray is a sculptor who sculpts with light. With his rayographs, he pursued his chess game with Duchamp. By capturing banal everyday objects on paper, he mirrored Duchamp's elevation of mass-produced objects to the status of sculpture. Duchamp got the point. From New York, he saluted Man Ray's success. "I'm delighted to see that you're having fun, and most important, that you've ditched painting." Man Ray proudly exulted, "I'm finally rid of the sticky substance of paint, and I'm working directly with light itself. I photograph what I can't paint. In other words, I photograph what's in my mind. I capture on paper the shape of my dreams." The immediacy of the rayographs followed the logic of daydreaming and automatic writing, with which the surrealists aimed to revolutionize literature. In July 1923, Sarah asked Man Ray to make a film for a Dada event. Man Ray, who'd never made a film, decided to apply to filmmaking his method of direct printing, to work without a camera. He took 30 meters of film, cut it into workable segments of 30 to 50 centimeters, and laid them on a table in his darkroom. Under safety light, he placed directly onto the film drawing pins, nails, marbles, string, ignoring the borders of the frames. On some other strips, he printed photos of nudes by direct contact. Finally, he sprinkled the lot with salt and pepper. By alternating the sequences produced in his rayographs with real footage, he produced a 3-minute film in one night, or so he claimed. Return to Reason, as he called his film, was shown at a rowdy gathering during which Breton's friends decided to take on Sarah's and Cocteau's supporters. In his memoirs, Man Ray noted that both camps applauded him. He was everyone's American friend, their semi-official photographer. At first, he worked in makeshift conditions in his hotel room. Here, in room 37, he produced his first rayographs. Here he took his first photo of Kiki, whom he'd just picked up in a café in Montparnasse. And it was here that James Joyce posed for him on the advice of Sylvia Beach, who'd recently published Ulysses. Using only the most basic equipment, he managed to produce numerous portraits. He left the Hôtel de l'Ombre after 6 months and rented a studio, a very nice studio, in the Rue Campagne Première. He bought darkroom equipment and set up a photography corner for his clients and models, not to mention his numerous friends, and friends of friends, who all wanted their portraits done. Scores of hopeful nobodies queued up for his lens. Word spread fast. To be done by Man Ray, as one star of that small world put it, was a mark of social success. Vogue and Vanity Fair bought his portraits for their Hall of Fame. The same magazines also commissioned him to photograph celebrities. Soon Man Ray was earning enough money to move into a 3-room suite in the Hotel Istria, next door to his studio, which was now reserved exclusively for work. To help him prepare his photo shoots and to develop his negs and prints, Man Ray used assistants, preferably female. Berenice Abbott and Lee Miller, after working for him, became famous in their own right. He had a passionate affair with Lee Miller, which ended in stormy scenes of jealousy. Man Ray worked hard. His address was in the guidebooks, bringing wealthy tourists to his door to have their portraits taken. American magazines commissioned photos of apartments, furniture, gardens, celebrities. He became the photographer for American high society and the English gentry. These lavish commissions could take him outside Paris. On a trip to Biarritz and the Basque coast, he made his second film, Imak Bakia, sponsored by Arthur Wheeler, a patron of the arts. What was the secret of his success? His talent. Max Jacob, delighted with his portrait, wrote, "You have the art of seizing truth. Portraits by painters never truly resemble their subjects. But here I'm just me, not very handsome, not too ugly, neither younger nor older, with a fleshy nose and the mouth of a kind of crazy woman. I don't want to part with this truthful image of myself. 1,000 thanks. I'd be happy to advertise you if that's what you'd like." For Breton, Man Ray had the eye of a great hunter, infinite patience, and an instinct for the emotionally charged moment when a fleeting harmony between daydreaming and action settles on the subject's face. What lies at the core of this art? From his early experiments, he developed a few simple rules. He set the lighting before the clients arrived, to reduce session times to a minimum. He recommended that clients shouldn't smile. He asked them to close their eyes, and then open them suddenly. Sometimes, to relax his patients, as he called them, he would give them a prop to hold, so that their expression became serene and profound. The background was usually sober, Hessian, checkerboard designs. Plain white or grey background paper. On which he played with shadows. Sometimes he featured an object, too. He took only a few shots, never more than 12. He set up his camera at least 3 meters from the subject to avoid distorting the face. He cropped his prints carefully. If necessary, he touched up the photos to correct any defects, adding a few pencil strokes to refine a face or a hip. He didn't like taking his equipment out of the studio, but he did so sometimes. He knew how to capture in the setting for his subjects some significant details of their personality. Even in his early New York portraits, Man Ray understood that what makes a good photograph is the play of contrasts. It could be 2 faces, or even 3. A silhouette and its shadow, the light and dark of an outfit, a face and a mask. It's a lesson drawn from chess. As he put it, the opposition between a white and a black square is fundamentally beautiful. There are always 2 almost equal parts in Man Ray's portraits. Hands and faces are distributed symmetrically. His fashion photos demonstrate his mastery of such contrasts. Another type of contrast is called solarization. Man Ray said he discovered this technique by chance, accidentally switching on a light while developing a film. Maybe. In any case, it's an effect that fitted wonderfully with the development of his aesthetic. Solarization accentuates the contours and intensifies the whites by inverting the values between the whites and the blacks. With this method, photography becomes like drawing. The bodies appear to be outlined with a pencil, a sublime pencil which transforms matter, while a mysterious inner light radiates from the subjects. The primacy of matter over thought. This title is a manifesto proclaiming solarization as a sort of photochemical miracle. But it's a risky technique, especially when applied, as Man Ray liked doing it, directly to the negative while it's being developed. If the flash is too long, the negative is irreparably fogged. But solarizing the negative results in a detailed and finely shaded print, which can be reproduced indefinitely. Man Ray's commercial success was due to the fact that he put as much care and research into commissioned work as he did into his so-called art photography. Whatever the objective of a commission, here for hairdresser Antoine, known as the sculptor of masks, he took the opportunity to explore his effects. In fact, he used fashion to further his art. Every material has its own lighting. Each model is modelled in her own shadows. Although most of the sumptuous decors were dictated by clients, he took great liberties in how he used them. Every line has its own staging. The sophistication of the lighting emphasizes the opulence of the clothes. He understood how one shape rhymes with another. He used friends' artworks. Here a Brancusi, here a Giacometti, or his own work to introduce subtle harmonics. The decor amplifies the sophistication of the poses, which flatter the gowns. Straight lines against curves. Chinese ink on rough paper. The painter's hand guides the hand of the photographer. These touch-ups are the touch of Man Ray. Thanks to income from his fashion work, his portraits of rich Americans and his photos for advertising, Man Ray was never short of money. But he would have preferred his fame and fortune to rest on his painting. His home was full of his own paintings, and visitors who hadn't the sense to notice them got a frosty reception. For Man Ray, the same principles applied to his photos and paintings. In fact, Many of his drawings and paintings are based on his photos. Whether in painting or photography, his aim was always the same: to show an idea rather than an object, and a dream rather than an idea. Like painting, photography was for him an instrument of derealization, going against the current of the great realist photographers of his time. I photograph not nature, but my imagination. Rather than photographing some banal place, I'd sooner take my handkerchief out of my pocket, crumple it as I please, and photograph it as I see fit. We can be subjective, even totally, but we can never totally escape from reality. Reality catches up with us in one way or another. As Breton put it so well, what is so admirable about the imaginary is that it does away with the imagination. There is only reality. Is there really no difference between his painting and photography? There is a difference, of course. In his paintings, human figures are rare, or if they are present, they are schematic, cut into slices, robotized, conceptualized, reduced to a symbolic minimum, the mere ghosts of bodies. But the photographs teem with bodies, beautiful, sensual, eroticized, caressed, magnified. The body is reserved for the caresses of the photographer. It is in his photos, not in his paintings, that Man Ray composed, to quote Breton, the real poem to the ladies of our time. a rare painted portrait, an imaginary one of the Marquis de Sade. Sade fascinated Man Ray. Rue Sade. Homage to Sade. Monument to Sade. The Sade estate. He even visited the ruins of de Sade's castle near Avignon. The fact that Marie-Laure de Noailles was a descendant of de Sade increased his admiration for this patron of the arts, who both produced his films and acted in them. This ambiguous torture scene with Merit Oppenheim, another of Man Ray's great loves, and the artist Marcoussis, with its machinery, ink for blood, its timeless shadows and mysterious rites, is like some erotic ceremony from the pages of de Sade. What delight to be given poison by such a heroine! Man Ray dies, but in ecstasy. A close look at Man Ray's work reveals many symbols straight from de Sade. This prison cell window, these tiers of glass, this mesh, amputated hands, torsos bound, strapped, crucified, cropping, cutting, dismembering, instruments of torture, flagellation, scars, groups knotted together in strange erotic rituals. He met Juliet Browner in Hollywood in 1940. Did he marry her because she bore the same name as one of de Sade's heroines? Maybe so. In his last Parisian studio in the Rue Férou, there is a screen he painted, entitled The 20 Days and Nights of Juliet. That title is a direct echo of the divine Marquis's 120 Days of Sodom. In this game of chess, he was unlikely to be beaten by his friend Duchamp. Sade liberated Man Ray from Duchamp by lifting the prohibition on painting the human form. In the 1930s, Man Ray made a series of photos with the wooden dummies used in figure drawing. He placed them in positions one might believe were inspired by the writings of de Sade. In his Domaine de Sade, or Sade estate, Man Ray discloses the secret purpose of these compositions. The wooden dummies are rebels. Man Ray sends them to storm Duchamp's symbolic fortress, the bottle rack. They embrace on the summit, in defiance of all the rules. In his struggle against Duchamp, Man Ray dared to photograph what he didn't dare paint. Perhaps because at the time photography was not considered a noble art, he felt free to use it to pursue the dream of figurative artists, to express the beauty of the human body through accurate rendering and original composition. In painting, he renounced this dream. We care little for lost battles, so his paintings move us less than his photos, except when their titles reveal a well-kept secret. For example, À l'heure de l'observatoire, les amoureux, observatory time, the lovers. What is the link between time and the lovers? The Paris Observatory houses a French-speaking clock. At the fourth stroke it will be exactly. As time flies, what happens to the lovers? They become a memory floating in space. A mouth you'd like to keep prisoner outside of time. A timeless well of ecstasy. Man Ray, masculine noun, synonym of pleasure, playing, and pleasuring. That's how Duchamp defined his friend, saluting his passion for life, his creative freedom, and recognizing his victory, perhaps not over Duchamp, but, who knows, over death itself. Pleasure, playing. Man Ray never renounced comedy, great comedy, divine like Dante's, human like Balzac's, all-encompassing like Shakespeare's. What better proof of this than these photos and their titles? Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, The Merry Wives of Windsor, As You Like It, Antony and Cleopatra, and All's Well That Ends Well. All of Man Ray's work tends to one end, the universal drama. When Max Ernst showed him the mathematical objects in the collection of the Henri Poincaré Institute, Man Ray began imagining how to encapsulate his vision and his feelings about the world in a single work, in the same way that scientists condense measured truths in a single equation, the way that playwrights embrace time and space in a single drama, immense and unique. Man Ray managed to concentrate the universal time of drama in his best-known photos. For example, The Prayer. It is one of his most famous works, created in a single session. As the contact prints were found in his studio after his death, we can observe each phase of the photograph's genesis. The Prayer is a moment in a short photo novel. A woman and her lover are embracing under the gaze of an indifferent divinity, who doesn't warn them that the woman's husband is about to return. Their first kiss, fully clothed. Hurry up, take off your clothes. Come here, my love. A cigarette after making love. Oh God, my husband. Please don't kill me. Die, bitch. Death is too good for you. My God, what have I done? Having played around with bloody ribbons of scarlet, in the end Man Ray published only 2 photos from this session. This one, a close-up of the body, and The Prayer, Is the achievement of this photograph just a stroke of luck? Or was it carefully thought out, needing all its staging to emerge? Whatever the reasons, this photo is a masterpiece. In a remarkable way it combines several elements. The ambiguity of the body's position is emphasized by the title, suggesting the Sa'dian theme of the erotic relationship that binds victim and executioner together. It also expresses the voluntary bond forged between the photographer and his model, united in their shared quest for an unforgettable moment of pleasure, perhaps 6 seconds long.
Au 4e top, il sera exactement 0 heure, 0 minute, 6 secondes.
Je travaille pour maintenant, à l'instant même. Ce que l'avenir va dire, ça je m'en fous complètement.
This week, Gus makes a move, Beres asks a question, and Linville becomes curious. Want to know more? Be watching 8:30 Friday for Baby Father, and all will be revealed.